The Carson family lived in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and an aura of tranquility. Richard Carson, a well-respected accountant, and his wife Sophia, a beloved elementary school teacher, seemed to embody the perfect American dream. They had 2 children, Anna and Tyler, who were the pride and joy of their parents. One crisp autumn morning, the facade of perfection shattered. Richard Carson returned home from a weekend fishing trip with his friends to find the house eerily silent. The usual warmth and cheer were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. He called out for Sophia but received no response. Anxiety gnawed at him as he climbed the stairs to their bedroom. The sight that greeted him was every husband's nightmare. Sophia lay motionless on the bed, her skin a pale hue that contrasted starkly with the dark, dried blood staining the sheets. Richard's heart pounded as he rushed to her side, desperately trying to shake her awake. It was futile. Sophia was gone. Richard's frantic call to 911 brought the police and paramedics rushing to the scene. They confirmed what Richard already knew. Sophia Carson was dead. The initial investigation began with officers combing through the house for clues. Richard was in shock, barely able to process the questions thrown his way. Detective Sarah McMillan, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for her keen instincts, took charge of the case. She quickly established that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Sophia knew her attacker. As the investigation progressed, Richard's alibi was scrutinized, but his fishing buddies corroborated his story, placing him miles away at the time of Sophia's death. The community was in disbelief. The Carsons had always appeared to be the perfect couple, deeply in love and committed to their family. However, as the days passed, whispers of Richard's suspected infidelity began to surface. Sophia's best friend, Laura, mentioned that Sophia had confided in her about her fears that Richard was cheating. This revelation cast a shadow of suspicion over Richard, despite his solid alibi. The media quickly picked up the story, painting a picture of a troubled marriage and a potential crime of passion. The pressure mounted on the police to solve the case, but with Richard's airtight alibi, they were at a loss. It was then that Sophia's sister, Megan, decided to take matters into her own hands. She hired a private investigator, Jake Thompson, to dig deeper into Sophia's suspicions and uncover the truth behind her sister's death. Richard and Sophia Carson's love story began in high school. They were the quintessential sweethearts, inseparable and deeply in love. After graduation, they went to college together, got married, and started a family. Their life seemed like a fairy tale filled with love, success, and 2 beautiful children. Richard's career as an accountant flourished, and Sophia found her calling as a teacher. They were well-liked in their community, active in local events, and always seen together at neighborhood gatherings. But beneath the surface, Sophia harbored growing suspicions about her husband's fidelity. It started with small things: late nights at the office, unexplained phone calls, and Richard's increasing emotional distance. Sophia confided in her best friend, Laura, sharing her fears and doubts. Laura advised her to confront Richard, but Sophia was hesitant. She didn't want to believe that the man she loved could betray her. As months turned into years, Sophia's suspicions deepened. She found herself checking Richard's phone when he wasn't looking, scrutinizing his behavior for any signs of infidelity. Her anxiety grew, casting a shadow over her once happy marriage. She often asked Laura if she was overreacting, but Laura could see the toll it was taking on her friend. One evening, Sophia found a lipstick stain on Richard's collar. It was the final straw. She confronted him, demanding the truth. Richard denied any wrongdoing, insisting that it was a misunderstanding. He claimed he was loyal and devoted, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Their arguments became more frequent and intense. Sophia felt trapped in a web of doubt and mistrust, while Richard grew increasingly frustrated with her accusations. In her darkest moments, Sophia wondered if she was losing her mind. She contemplated hiring a private investigator, but feared what she might discover. Instead, she continued to confide in Laura, who remained her steadfast support. Laura, concerned for her friend's well-being, suggested they document everything. Sophia began keeping a journal, recording every suspicious incident, every fight, and every moment of doubt. She hoped that if the truth ever came out, she would have the evidence to confront Richard once and for all. Sophia's sister, Megan, was also aware of the tensions in the Carson household. She had always been close to Sophia and noticed the changes in her demeanor. Megan urged Sophia to take action, but Sophia remained paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. As the months passed, Sophia's suspicions became an all-consuming obsession. She couldn't escape the nagging feeling that her husband was leading a double life. This unrelenting doubt ultimately led Megan to hire Jake Thompson, determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for her sister. Detective Sarah McMillan's team worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to Sophia Carson's death. They interviewed family, friends, and neighbors, trying to build a profile of Sophia's life and the possible motives for her murder. Richard's cooperation was noted, but his solid alibi kept him out of immediate suspicion. Megan, desperate for answers, turned to private investigator Jake Thompson. Jake was known for his tenacity and skill in uncovering hidden truths. With a career spanning over 2 decades, he had a reputation for solving the most challenging cases. When Megan approached him, he listened intently to her concerns about Richard's infidelity and Sophia's suspicions. Jake agreed to take the case, starting with a thorough review of Sophia's journal. The detailed entries painted a picture of a woman tormented by doubt and fear. Sophia's descriptions of Richard's behavior and her growing anxiety provided Jake with valuable insights into the possible cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage. Jake's first step was to delve into Richard's background. He conducted surveillance, followed Richard to work, and monitored his interactions. Richard appeared to be a devoted father and professional, but Jake knew better than to take things at face value. Interviews with Sophia's friends and colleagues revealed a woman who was deeply loved and respected. They spoke of her kindness, dedication to her students, and the love she had for her family. However, they also mentioned the changes they had seen in her over the past few years. Laura, Sophia's best friend, was a crucial source of information. She shared the details of Sophia's fears and the confrontations she had with Richard. Laura also mentioned a woman named Carla Mason, a former colleague of Richard's who had once been very close to him. Sophia had always been wary of Carla, suspecting her of having an affair with Richard. Jake's investigation led him to Carla Mason. He dug into her background, uncovering a series of troubling details. Carla had a history of unstable relationships and a reputation for being manipulative. She had left the company where she worked with Richard under mysterious circumstances, and Jake's instincts told him there was more to the story. As Jake pieced together the puzzle, he began to see a pattern. Carla's presence in Richard's life, Sophia's escalating suspicions, and the sudden violent end to Sophia's life were all connected. He knew he was onto something significant, but he needed concrete evidence to prove Carla's involvement. Jake intensified his surveillance on Carla, watching her every move. He interviewed her acquaintances, piecing together a profile of a woman driven by jealousy and obsession. It became clear that Carla harbored a deep resentment towards Sophia, viewing her as the obstacle to her happiness with Richard. With the pieces falling into place,
Jake prepared to confront Carla, determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for Sophia Carson. Jake Thompson was no stranger to the darker side of human nature, with years of experience as a private investigator. He had seen it all: infidelity, fraud, even murder. But the Carson case had a complexity that intrigued him. As he delved deeper, the
tangled web of deceit and betrayal began to unravel. Richard Carson, on the surface, was a model husband and father, but Jake's investigation revealed another side to him. Richard had indeed been unfaithful, and his affair with Carla Mason was more than a fleeting indiscretion. Carla Mason was a striking woman in her early 30s with a magnetic presence that drew people to her. She had met Richard when they both worked at the same accounting firm. Their affair began innocently enough with shared lunches and late-night conversations, but it quickly escalated into a passionate and clandestine relationship. Jake's surveillance provided him with the evidence he needed. He captured photos of Richard and Carla meeting in secret, their intimate moments betraying the depth of their connection. But it wasn't just the affair that caught Jake's attention. It was Carla's behavior. She was possessive, obsessive, and clearly driven by a desire to replace Sophia in Richard's life. Jake's investigation into Carla's past revealed a troubled history. She had grown up in a dysfunctional family with a mother who was emotionally distant and a series of abusive relationships. These experiences had left Carla with deep emotional scars and a desperate need for validation and love. When she met Richard, she saw him as her ticket to a better life, a chance to escape her past and find happiness. However, Carla's obsession with Richard took a dark turn when she realized he would never leave Sophia. Despite Richard's promises and assurances, he remained with his wife, further fueling Carla's resentment. She began to see Sophia as the obstacle standing between her and the life she desired. Her jealousy grew, and with it, a dangerous resolve. Jake's breakthrough came when he discovered a series of emails between Carla and Richard. In them, Carla expressed her frustration and anger, accusing Richard of leading her on and demanding that he leave Sophia. Richard's responses were apologetic but non-committal, indicating his reluctance to abandon his family. One email in particular stood out. It was sent a week before Sophia's death. Carla had written a long, emotional message threatening to expose their affair if Richard didn't take action. She hinted at a plan to remove Sophia from the picture, a chilling foreshadowing of the tragedy that would soon unfold. Armed with this evidence, Jake intensified his efforts to link Carla directly to the crime. He interviewed her former colleagues and friends, uncovering a pattern of manipulative and unstable behavior. They described Carla as someone who would go to great lengths to get what she wanted, often using deceit and emotional manipulation to achieve her goals. One colleague in particular provided a crucial piece of information. He recalled a conversation with Carla where she had fantasized about a life with Richard, free from the constraints of his marriage. She had spoken with a chilling detachment about the possibility of Sophia disappearing, a comment that now took on a sinister significance. Jake knew he was close. He gathered all the evidence he had collected and prepared to confront Carla. He needed her to confess, to break under the weight of the truth. Carla Mason's affair with Richard Carson had started with innocent flirtation and grown into a full-blown obsession. She had fallen hard for Richard, seeing him as her escape from a life of loneliness and pain. But as their relationship deepened, so did her jealousy and desire to replace Sophia Carson. The affair began 3 years prior at an office holiday party. Richard, charming and attentive, had noticed Carla sitting alone and struck up a conversation. They found common ground in their love for their work and shared frustrations about their personal lives. Richard confided in Carla about his strained marriage, while Carla shared her dreams of finding true love. Their connection was instant and electric. Soon, they were meeting for lunches, then dinners, and finally secret rendezvous at hotels. Richard was careful to keep their affair hidden, but Carla's feelings for him grew stronger with each passing day. She fantasized about a future where they could be together openly, free from the constraints of his marriage. Carla's fantasies, however, were marred by the reality of Sophia's existence. Every time Richard went home to his wife, Carla's resentment festered. She started to view Sophia as the obstacle to her happiness, the barrier standing between her and the life she wanted with Richard. Carla's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would call Richard at all hours, demanding to know where he was and who he was with. She became possessive, monitoring his social media and showing up unannounced at his office. Richard, initially flattered by her attention, began to feel trapped by her neediness. The breaking point came when Carla discovered that Richard had lied to her about spending a weekend with Sophia. Enraged, she confronted him, demanding that he choose between her and his wife. Richard, caught off guard by her intensity, tried to calm her down. He promised he would leave Sophia, but deep down he knew he couldn't follow through. As Carla's obsession grew, so did her hatred for Sophia. She started to stalk her, learning her routines and habits. Carla would drive by the Carson house late at night, watching from the shadows as Sophia went about her life. Her anger boiled over as she saw the life she wanted being lived by another woman. Carla's plan to remove Sophia took shape over several months. She began to fantasize about ways to eliminate her rival, her thoughts growing darker and more dangerous. The email she sent to Richard threatening to expose their affair was a desperate attempt to force his hand. But when he failed to act, Carla decided to take matters into her own hands. On the night of the murder, Carla waited until she knew Richard was away on his fishing trip. She had meticulously planned every detail, from disabling the security cameras to ensuring she left no trace of her presence. She broke into the Carson house using a spare key Richard had given her, moving silently through the darkened rooms. Sophia was asleep when Carla entered the bedroom. The sight of her rival, peaceful and unaware, fueled Carla's rage. She approached the bed, a knife clutched tightly in her hand. Sophia woke up just as Carla lunged, but it was too late. The attack was swift and brutal, driven by years of pent-up anger and resentment. After the deed was done, Carla stood over Sophia's lifeless body, a mixture of triumph and horror washing over her. She had done it. She had removed the obstacle to her happiness. But as the adrenaline faded, the reality of her actions set in. She quickly wiped down the surfaces she had touched, making sure to leave no evidence behind. Then she slipped out of the house and disappeared into the night. Carla believed she had committed the perfect crime, but Jake Thompson's investigation unraveled her carefully constructed alibi. His surveillance and interviews revealed the depth of her obsession and the lengths she had gone to in order to be with Richard. The evidence he gathered painted a chilling picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and willing to kill to get what she wanted. As Jake prepared to confront Carla, he knew the gravity of the situation. He had seen it all: infidelity, fraud, even murder. But the Carson case had a complexity that intrigued him. He had delved deep into a tangled web of deceit and betrayal, and now he was ready to bring justice for Sophia Carson. Jake Thompson knew that Carla Mason's fragile psyche would be her undoing. The weight of her guilt, combined with the mountain of evidence against her, would be too much for her to bear. It was only a matter of time before she broke under the pressure and confessed to her heinous crime. Jake meticulously gathered the evidence needed to build an airtight case against Carla. He knew that to secure a conviction, every detail had to be scrutinized and every lead followed. His investigation had revealed Carla's obsessive behavior, her deep-seated resentment towards Sophia, and the lengths she went to in order to be with Richard. Now it was time to piece it all together. Jake's first task was to consolidate the surveillance footage and photographs he had taken of Carla and Richard. The images clearly showed their intimate relationship, disproving any claims that Carla might make about their affair being over. These visual proofs were crucial in establishing Carla's motive. Next, Jake focused on the emails between Carla and Richard. The threatening messages Carla had sent, demanding that Richard leave Sophia or face the consequences, were damning evidence of her intent. Jake printed out the emails, highlighting the passages where Carla hinted at drastic measures if she didn't get her way. Jake also gathered testimonies from Carla's former colleagues and acquaintances. One witness, a close friend of Carla's, reluctantly shared a conversation they had just days before Sophia's murder. Carla had expressed a disturbing desire for Sophia to disappear, even making offhand remarks about how easy it would be to make it happen. This testimony painted a clear picture of Carla's premeditation. The most crucial piece of evidence, however, came from the crime scene itself. Jake had worked closely with Detective Sarah McMillan, sharing his findings and collaborating on the investigation. Forensic analysis revealed traces of Carla's DNA on the knife used to kill Sophia, as well as on the bedroom door handle. Despite her efforts to clean up, Carla had made critical mistakes that tied her directly to the murder. Jake and Sarah also discovered a partial fingerprint on the windowsill where Carla had entered the house. While it wasn't a complete match, it added to the mounting evidence against her. Jake knew that these physical proofs, combined with the digital and testimonial evidence, created a compelling case. With everything in place, Jake turned his attention to Carla's acquaintances. He interviewed neighbors, friends, and even casual acquaintances, piecing together a profile of a woman driven by desperation and jealousy. One neighbor recalled seeing Carla's car parked near the Carson house on several occasions, further corroborating her stalking behavior. The final piece of the puzzle came from a surprising source: Richard. Racked with guilt and realizing the extent of Carla's obsession, Richard agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. He provided additional emails and messages from Carla, as well as his own account of their relationship. Richard's testimony was crucial in establishing the timeline and confirming Carla's motives. Jake presented his findings to Detective McMillan, who was impressed by the thoroughness of the investigation. Together, they compiled a detailed report outlining Carla's motives, actions and the overwhelming evidence against her. The case was ready to go to trial. Carla was arrested at her apartment, her shocked expression revealing her belief that she had gotten away with murder. As the police led her away in handcuffs, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction. He had uncovered the truth and ensured that justice would be served for Sophia Carson. The legal proceedings were swift. Carla's defense tried to argue that she had been framed, but the evidence was irrefutable. The emails, the forensic evidence, and the testimonies painted a clear picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and willing to kill to achieve her desires. In the end, Carla was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Richard's involvement, though not criminal, left a stain on his reputation and devastated his family. The Carson children, Anna and Tyler, faced a future without their mother and with a father whose actions had indirectly led to her death. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, those left behind struggled to find a sense of normalcy. The Carson family's once bright future was now overshadowed by loss and betrayal. Megan, Sophia's sister, took on the role of guardian for Anna and Tyler. She moved into the Carson home, providing stability and support for the children. Megan's bond with her niece and nephew deepened as they navigated their shared grief. Together, they honored Sophia's memory, finding comfort in the love she had given them. Laura, Sophia's best friend, also played a crucial role in helping the family heal. She organized memorial events, celebrating Sophia's life and the impact she had on those around her. The community rallied together, offering support and love to the Carson children, ensuring they knew they were not alone. Richard, burdened by guilt and remorse, sought therapy to confront his actions and the consequences they had wrought. He knew he could never undo the pain he had caused, but he hoped to find a path to redemption. Richard's journey was one of self-reflection and accountability, a long and difficult process of coming to terms with his past. As the years passed, Anna and Tyler grew up, carrying with them the lessons of their mother's life and the strength of their Aunt Megan's love. They pursued their dreams, determined to honor Sophia's memory through their actions and achievements. The scars of their past remained, but they found ways to move forward, holding on to the positive memories of their family. The Carson case, with all its twists and tragedies, became a beacon of resilience for the community. It reminded them of the fragility of life and the strength that could be found in unity and support. A psychological exhumation changed the outcome of the investigation 4 years later. A psychological profile is called a detailed examination and analysis of a person's personality, their character traits, behavioral peculiarities, emotional state, intellect, self-esteem, and the motivations behind their actions. To compile such a profile, experts typically resort to methods such as interviews, various psychological tests, observations, situational modeling, and even analysis of social media pages. But what if the person has long passed away, and you need to create their psychological profile and assess their emotional state shortly before death? The case of Kristen Trickle is quite complex and unique in its kind. It is referred to as the first instance of psychological exhumation in forensic history, conducted to uncover the motivations and thought processes of a young woman who suddenly decided to end her life. No one believed that the joyful, devout Kristen, who had big plans for the future, would suddenly end everything without any apparent reason. The forensic pathologist's conclusions supported the main theory, but an experienced psychologist managed to uncover the truth. The main problem was the time that had passed since the tragedy. Years had gone by, but eventually, this did not prevent the conviction of the criminal who was sure he had gotten away with it. Kristen Trickle, née Trickle, was born on August 14, 1993, in a small town in southeastern Nebraska. Her childhood can hardly be described as carefree and untroubled. Her biological mother left the family when the little girl was not even 3 years old. The woman abandoned her husband and child for another man, moved to California, and never again showed interest in her daughter's fate. Kristen's father, James, raised his daughter on his own, doing everything possible to ensure she lacked for nothing. However, the man suffered from a severe illness that progressively worsened, and when Kristen turned 16, her father passed away. Since there were no other close relatives, she could have been sent to a shelter until she came of age. At this time, An aunt and uncle on her father's side, who lived in the neighboring state of Kansas, stepped in. Although the couple was raising 3 children of their own, they expressed a willingness to take in their orphan niece and do everything possible to ensure her a comfortable and happy life. Soon, the young girl moved into her relative's home. In her new family, Kristen never felt like an outsider. On the contrary, her aunt and uncle treated her just as they did their own children, surrounding her with love and care. Kristen herself did well in school, attended art studio classes, helped her family with household tasks, and dreamed of becoming a veterinary doctor because she loved animals dearly. Relatives and friends described her as responsive, kind, friendly, and very sweet. She never despaired, confidently pursued her goals, and energized everyone around her with her optimism. The Rice family was religious, so they regularly attended church on Sundays, where 18-year-old Kristen met a young man named Colby. He was an aspiring musician performing as part of a band that played music during sermons and services. He had also recently turned 18, was quite talented, and dreamed of building a successful music career in the future. The young people quickly formed a friendship, which soon turned into a romantic relationship. Colby was skilled on the guitar and wrote his own songs, which he dedicated to his beloved, capturing her heart. He was open, sociable, cheerful, easily made friends, and could easily be the life of any party. After finishing high school, the young man took a serious interest in military affairs and joined the Army. By the age of 18, he had signed several contracts and commenced his service in the U.S. Armed Forces. Over the next 3 years, he managed to build a decent military career. Meanwhile, he stayed in touch with Kristen, with whom he frequently called and corresponded. At the age of 21, Colby unexpectedly entered the reserves, returned home, and proposed to his sweetheart, who happily accepted. The couple married in April 2014. The newlyweds settled in a small town called Hazen, Kansas, where Colby finished college and pursued a music career, albeit not very successfully. He performed at small parties and local events, playing cover versions of well-known hits. The couple had 2 dogs, which they adored, and many considered their marriage quite happy. However, 5 years into their marriage, a terrible tragedy occurred. On a grim Halloween Eve on October 31st, 2019, around 4 in the morning, a distressed call was made to the emergency services dispatch. The caller, a man who identified himself as Colby Trickle, reported his wife Kristen had fired a bullet into her head from a revolver kept in their home. A medical team was promptly dispatched to the scene along with a police patrol car that was nearby at the time. At the front door, they were met by a young man who allowed the officers inside but stayed outside himself. Trickle appeared relatively calm given the severity of the situation. When the officers entered the bedroom, they found a woman lying on the bed in a pool of her own blood. A large revolver lay on her abdomen, and a gunshot wound was evident on her chin. It seemed she had already passed away, but unexpectedly the victim moved her hand, and an officer found a weak pulse and breathing. Following this, Kristen was moved to the adjacent room to properly position her on the floor for resuscitation efforts. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, she had passed away by the time the ambulance arrived, and the medical team could only confirm her death. Sergeant Brandon Hotman went outside and informed Colby that his spouse had passed away. The young man asked repeatedly if the officer was sure about this, and upon receiving confirmation, he began to cry. His behavior and tears seemed insincere, as just minutes before Hotman's arrival, he had been casually talking with other patrollers about video games. At first glance, it appeared that the woman had indeed decided to end her life voluntarily, but upon examining the scene, experienced detectives immediately suspected foul play. It was Halloween Eve, and it seemed the deceased had been actively preparing for the celebration. On her bedroom's vanity lay handmade costume decorations she had prepared, and in the kitchen, themed treats for children were set out in bowls, including lollipop bats, ghost gummy worms, and more. The chosen method of ending her life was very strange and untypical for a woman, as was the scene itself. First, the deceased was found nearly undressed, wearing only her underwear. Women generally want to look beautiful even in death, concerned about how they will be found. Secondly, a gunshot to the head is not a typically feminine method due to concerns about disfiguring themselves. Kristen's face was so badly damaged that she had to be buried in a closed casket. The third and most significant oddity was the weapon itself. The revolver was too large and cumbersome for such a petite and fragile woman. It would have been uncomfortable for her to hold, and she could hardly have twisted her arm to shoot herself in the chin. Moreover, the position of the weapon puzzled the officer, as it lay on the woman's stomach pointing sideways. However, the deceased spouse explained that after realizing what had happened, he too had thought about ending his life, held the revolver to his temple, but then abandoned the thought and decided to call emergency services in hopes of saving his beloved. While law enforcement continued their work at the scene, the woman's mobile phone, lying on a nightstand, unexpectedly rang with an alarm. It turned out the deceased had plans for the morning and had set the alarm not to be late, but she seemingly changed her mind during the night and decided to end her life. This looked highly suspicious, and detectives suspected foul play. They were dealing with a masterful staging. The widower, now the main suspect, was due for questioning. Colby willingly agreed to go to the police station to give his statement. He appeared upset but not devastated, behaving calmly and confidently. He explained that on that evening, his wife Kristen returned from her job at Walmart, where she was a manager expecting a promotion to senior manager. They had played video games together, and then Colby went to bed early because he was feeling unwell while Kristen went to the kitchen to finish cleaning and setting out sweets for the holiday. In the middle of the night, Colby was awakened by a sudden loud bang. For a few seconds, he was disoriented, his ears ringing, and he could see nothing in the darkness. Once he turned on the light, he found his wife lying motionless beside him, blood pouring from her head. He tried to revive her, but realizing it was futile, he grabbed the revolver, held it to his own head, but then set it back on her body, called emergency services, and went outside to meet the police. The sequence and nature of his actions raised many questions. For instance, why he placed the weapon on the woman's abdomen instead of throwing it on the floor, the bed, or leaving it on a nightstand. It was also unclear why he waited outside for the police and medics if he thought his wife might still be saved. Typically, in such situations, people attempt to perform life-saving measures or simply press something against the wound to stop the bleeding. The former serviceman did not approach his wife again, explaining that he was in shock while a police officer was trying to provide first aid before the medics arrived. Colby did not come over or inquire about the situation. Instead, he casually talked outside with a patrol officer about music and video games. Upon learning that Kristen was no longer alive, he squeezed out a few tears but quickly regained his composure. At the station, Colby was asked the standard question about whether there was any life insurance on the deceased, to which he responded negatively but added that he was entitled to some minor payouts from the armed forces where he had served. Incidentally, Trickle began boasting about his accomplishments, noting that he had served in intelligence and was involved in special operations around the world. His words sounded convincing, though it soon turned out that almost none of what he said was true. When asked why, in his opinion, his wife might have taken such a desperate step, he replied that she had suffered from prolonged depression from an early age, which developed against the backdrop of all the events that happened to her in childhood and adolescence. He mentioned her mother's betrayal, her father's death, and her forced life in her uncle and aunt's home, whom Kristen did not even know before. The widower's words again sounded convincing, and he spoke confidently and calmly. Nonetheless, experienced investigators felt that this man was lying and possibly had premeditated what to say. However, at that moment, they had nothing to charge him with, as there were no concrete pieces of evidence against him, so Mr. Trickle had to be released. Kristen's family's perspective: when Kristen's uncle, aunt, and her siblings were informed of the tragedy, they immediately traveled to Hayes, nearly 500 miles from their city, to speak with the police and prepare for the funeral. Unanimously, they vehemently denied the possibility that she could have willingly ended her life, citing her deep religious faith, regular church attendance, and her belief that such an act was a sin. Additionally, according to her family, Kristen was a life-loving optimist with ambitious future plans. Specifically, she wanted to open a shelter for homeless animals and had even scoped out an available property with a large plot of land she intended to lease long-term for this purpose. These statements were soon verified, and detectives confirmed that she had been negotiating to rent the property. Moreover, she was anticipating a promotion at work, a position she was very proud of, was preparing her costume and candies for Halloween, and had promised to visit her sister for her birthday in mid-November. Her relatives also insisted that she had never suffered from depression, had no mental disorders or harmful habits. Another crucial point they stressed was that she would never recklessly abandon her beloved dogs. During discussions with the police, the uncle and aunt suggested that Colby might have coldly dealt with his wife, orchestrating it to appear as though she had voluntarily left this world. They described her husband as a cruel and domineering man who tried to control every aspect of her interactions, chose whom she could communicate with, and would fly into a rage if Kristen did not respond to his calls or messages immediately. He also forbade her from talking to her relatives, and she would call them secretly from her husband. Visits were rare, but during her last visit, she confided that she could no longer tolerate such treatment, had talked with her husband about it, and if things did not change, they would have to separate. Following conversations with both the widower and the deceased relatives, detectives believed that the forensic examination would be decisive in the case. The examination revealed only one entry wound from a bullet located on the chin. The shot had been fired while the woman was lying on her back with the gun barrel pressed closely to her head. It was possible that she could have inflicted the wound herself, although it would have been extremely awkward for her to do so. There were no signs of struggle or resistance on Kristen's body. However, upon learning from relatives that Colby was a true tyrant with controlling behavior, the detectives insisted on an additional examination for any signs of bruises, abrasions, scratches, or other injuries in various stages of healing. They hypothesized that if the former serviceman had occasionally been violent towards his wife, there would inevitably be some traces. Yet, the investigation was met with disappointment, as no internal or external injuries were found other than the gunshot wound. The investigation continued to scrutinize Colby, examining his personality, and it was revealed that he was a pathological liar. He lied so frequently and convincingly that it seemed he began to believe his own fabrications. It started with the fact that he had never been in any hot spots nor had any involvement with intelligence, despite having convinced everyone during the interrogation that he was telling the truth. The man lied to those around him about having a successful music career and high earnings. In reality, for the past several years, Kristen, who worked tirelessly, had been the main breadwinner for their family. Colby, on the other hand, scraped by with occasional gigs during holidays, spending the rest of his time playing video games. Despite his real talent, he lacked persistence, patience, and was hindered by his laziness. Furthermore, the police had a warrant to seize and examine gadgets owned by the couple, and this inspection yielded quite intriguing results. The deceased phone calendar was packed with scheduled activities ranging from haircuts to meetings with a real estate agent. Meanwhile, Colby's messages revealed that he had been openly flirting with another woman, even exchanging messages while at the police station. On a laptop in the living room, a search history that had been deleted was recovered, showing that shortly before the tragedy, there were queries about the payout amount for a life insurance policy in the event of death. This last aspect particularly interested the authorities. Checks revealed that Colby had lied again. 2 insurance policies had been taken out on his wife, with him as the beneficiary in the event of her death. These included military spouse insurance as well as a standard life insurance policy. The amounts involved were far from trivial, contrary to what the man had claimed. He had even calculated exactly what payouts he would be entitled to. Despite numerous inconsistencies in the case, direct allegations from the deceased relatives against Colby, and the existence of a clear motive for him, the decision ultimately hinged on the forensic expert's report. The document stated that there were no signs of violence on the body except for a single gunshot wound, suggesting that it was highly likely that the deceased had voluntarily ended her life. The case was closed and archived. By that time, the widower had already received the payouts due to him from a special insurance for U.S. Armed Forces spouses. He received nearly $50,000 and from the life insurance policy over $100,000. On the very day the money was deposited into his account, he ordered a life-sized realistic doll for intimate pleasures from an online store. He also purchased a new gaming console, an electric guitar, and expensive musical equipment and began spending the rest on clothes and entertainment nearly every evening in bars and restaurants. Colby was enjoying life, sparing no expense for himself, and genuinely believed that the story was over. With no evidence against him and thus no potential charges, he lived happily for about 2 years until a pivotal event occurred. In the summer of 2021, a new district prosecutor was appointed, to whom the detectives handling the Trickle case appealed for help. They requested permission to reopen the investigation, asserting they had little doubt that the widower had eliminated his wife, making it appear as though she had voluntarily departed from life. As proof, they presented all the peculiarities and discrepancies, pointed to the restored browser history, and highlighted the suspect's very unusual behavior and his clear motive. After reviewing the case materials, the prosecutor authorized the reopening of the case, and in July 2021, Trickle was finally taken into custody. He was charged with first-degree premeditated homicide and intentional misleading of the investigation. During his arrest, he remained calm and immediately contacted his lawyers, who began working on his defense right away. Colby's defense relied on the forensic pathologist's findings and argued that Kristen had suffered from chronic depression for many years and that her tragic departure was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, his lawyers tried to portray their client as a loving and caring husband, a valorous serviceman, and a devout person. The investigation could have hit a dead end, as it relied heavily on the same medical conclusion. Thus, the prosecution took an unprecedented step by bringing an experienced specialist to create a psychological profile of the deceased and analyze her emotional state just before the tragedy. This unusual method was termed a psychological autopsy or psychological exhumation. The psychiatrist conducted extensive work analyzing data from Kristen's mobile phone, her social media posts, her most recent photos, and also by interviewing her relatives, friends, and colleagues. Gathering and analyzing the information took months, but the expert's conclusion was clear. Kristen could not have intended to end her life given her short-term and long-term plans. The legal proceedings in this complex case began only in September 2023, nearly 4 years after the tragedy. The defendant had a clear motive, behaved suspiciously, and consistently lied during interrogations, but the forensic expert's conclusion initially worked in his favor. However, the prosecution now had another report that could potentially turn the case around. When Colby was questioned about the insurance inquiries on his computer, he claimed they were probably made by his wife, wanting to know the payout amount. However, the date and time of the request completely contradicted his words, as the girl was confirmed to be at work at that time, verified by surveillance footage from the store. Asked about the life-size doll for intimate pleasures that he purchased even before his late wife was buried in other expenses, he responded that he couldn't sleep alone and needed someone to hold, and that he bought the console, guitar, etc. as a way to distract himself from grief. His mother corroborated his statements, fiercely defending her son throughout the trial. The psychiatrist's conclusion about the victim's emotional state was pivotal. This meticulous work took time, but its results left no doubt that Kristen had not planned to end her life. Additionally, a curious detail emerged from the autopsy report regarding the bullet's trajectory angle. In the courtroom, the jury was shown the weapon used and the angle at which the bullet entered the girl's chin. Kristen was right-handed, but the nature of the wound suggested that either she shot with her left hand or someone positioned to her left had placed the gun to the head of the sleeping girl and fired. To life imprisonment with the possibility of parole no earlier than 50 years. The defendant never admitted his guilt, and all his appeals were rejected. Most curious and strange in this case, however, is that corrections regarding the cause of death were never made to the medical report. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you. On November 20th, 2023, the jury unanimously found Colby guilty on all counts, sentencing him.
The Cape Flats region, located on the edge of Cape Town in South Africa, is known for its tough conditions. This area is marked by widespread poverty, the presence of gangs, and issues related to drug use. Situated on the flatlands to the southeast of the city's heart, communities such as Valhalla Park and Hines Park are where many families live, trying their best to overcome these challenges. However, these neighborhoods are also where dangerous gangs vie for wealth, influence, and dominance. In such a challenging environment, a young man named Cameron Wilson grew up. At just 17 years old, Cameron began a wave of violence that instilled fear across the Cape Flats. He was unusually cruel for someone so young, showing no compassion as he committed acts of rape, murder, and assault. Over a few years, he attacked many people, showing no regret for even the most horrific acts. Cameron's attacks were unpredictable and without any clear reason. He harmed people of all genders and ages, with no apparent link between them. His motives varied. He killed spontaneously for personal gain, for dominance, or simply for the sake of causing pain. It seemed as if he had an innate desire to harm others, which put him on the path to becoming one of the most feared criminals in South Africa's history. Cameron's first recorded act of violence occurred in October 2014. On that day, the 17-year-old Cameron had a loud argument with a man named Alfonso, which ended with Cameron fatally stabbing Alfonso. This incident was the beginning of a series of violent acts that would terrorize the community. In the neighborhood of Valhalla Park, a place known for its risks, Alfonso was on his usual route to his grandmother's house. It was a journey he made often without trouble. However, on this particular day, the calm was shattered by a loud dispute that caught the attention of the locals. They watched as Cameron hurried after Alfonso, confronted him, and then, with no second thoughts, stabbed him, leaving him to suffer a tragic fate on the pavement. The incident didn't go unnoticed. Several people saw what happened, yet fear silenced them. Cameron's father was a high-ranking member of the 28S, a feared prison gang in South Africa, and people were scared of what might happen if they spoke up. Their fears were justified when just 3 days after Alfonso's death, Toya, a shopkeeper who had seen the murder, was found shot dead. Toya was a respected figure, known for his dedication and honesty in running his store and supporting his family. He wasn't involved with Cameron or aware of his violent tendencies. When Cameron entered his shop, Toya recognized him as Alfonso's attacker and asked him to leave, which led to an argument. Cameron left, and Toya tried to follow him, likely to inform the authorities. Tragically, shortly after, Toya's life was cruelly taken, just a short distance from his store. The community of Cape Flats was gripped by a deep-seated fear, a silence that was enforced by the threat of violence. This silence played a role in Cameron's growing boldness and the continuation of his violent acts. The police found it difficult to gather evidence against him because people were too scared to speak up. This lack of action from witnesses allowed Cameron to carry on with his crimes, seemingly without any consequences. This culture of fear only seemed to encourage Cameron further, and the Cape Flats were about to witness even more terrifying events. Cameron's ability to avoid punishment for his earlier crimes led him into a horrifying spree of violence. The community was constantly on edge, never knowing when or where he would strike next. In December 2014, just 2 months after Toya's murder, Cameron committed another cold-blooded act. On Christmas Day, Ernest, a young man of 20, was attacked. He and his girlfriend had been at a tavern in Hines Park, Cape Town, and on their way home, they realized they had lost a small bag of cannabis. While searching for it, Cameron suddenly confronted Ernest, demanding money. When Ernest had nothing to offer, Cameron brutally assaulted him with a screwdriver, leaving him to die. The violence didn't stop there. In April 2015, Cameron continued his spree, attacking 2 more people in separate incidents. One of them was Cody, a 20-year-old who was out walking with a friend. Cameron demanded to see what was in Cody's backpack, and when Cody refused, Cameron's response was swift and violent. He stabbed Cody, adding another victim to his growing list of assaults.
Before escaping the scene, Cody Fander, despite severe injuries, miraculously survived the assault. Later that month, 17-year-old Dorney Davies fell prey to Cameron's violent tendencies. After visiting a friend, Dorney was crossing an open field on her way home when she encountered Cameron's cousin. Familiar with him from the neighborhood and considering him a friend, Dorney engaged in conversation without any apprehension. However, the situation took a dark turn when Cameron appeared, forcefully seized Dorney, and dragged her to a secluded spot. In this isolated area, Cameron coerced his cousin into assaulting Dorney before telling him to step aside. Dorney desperately pleaded for her release, questioning Cameron's motives, but her pleas were ignored. Cameron then committed a heinous act against her. After the attack, Dorney managed to escape and ran for her life, but Cameron pursued and stabbed her in the neck, leaving her to die. Fortunately, Dorney was quickly taken to a hospital where she survived the brutal attack. Although she could identify Cameron as her assailant, the trauma of the unprovoked aggression left deep psychological scars. Cameron remained at large, continuing his series of violent acts. The reasons for his non-arrest post-attack are speculative, but it may involve witnesses' reluctance to come forward and the fear of retribution from Cameron's and his father's gang, which could have contributed to his evasion of justice. Cameron's assaults appeared indiscriminate, affecting individuals of various ages and genders, creating an atmosphere of widespread fear, despite the increasing number of victims. Cameron Wilson was a man who did very bad things and didn't get caught for a long time. In April 2015, he did something really terrible. He hurt a 16-year-old girl named Stacy Mahali in a way that is too sad to talk about. Stacy was just going home from school with her friend Abigail Plates, who was also 16. They didn't know that meeting Cameron and his young friend would change their lives forever. At first, Cameron and his friend seemed okay, but then things got scary. Cameron showed a gun and made Stacy and Abigail go with them to a place where no one else was around. There he hurt both girls very badly. His young friend was watching to make sure no one came. After hurting them, Cameron told his friend to hurt the girls even more with a knife. Then, they did something called necklacing to the girls. This is usually done by people who want to punish someone they think did something wrong, but Cameron did it just to be mean. They put tires filled with gasoline around Stacy and Abigail's necks and set them on fire. They also threw rocks and bricks at them, which hurt them even more. The girls were left there, hurting a lot because of the fire. Stacy couldn't survive the terrible things that happened to her. She had many cuts and burns, and the doctors said she went through a lot of pain. But Abigail, even though she was hurt a lot too, stayed alive. She was very brave and told the police that Cameron Wilson and his friend were the ones who did this. Even though people were scared to say anything about Cameron, Abigail was brave enough to speak up. Her courage helped a lot in finding out the truth about what Cameron did. It's important to remember that this story is about something very sad and serious. If you or someone you know needs help because of something like this, please talk to someone who can help, like the police or a doctor. She knew for sure that Cameron was one of the bad guys and made sure he got caught. But even though Abigail saw everything and they had a lot of proof, Cameron was let out of jail soon after they caught him. Everyone was really surprised and upset that he was let go. People couldn't understand why someone who did something so terrible was allowed to be free. Some thought it showed that Cameron couldn't be touched, while others guessed that his dad's scary reputation with the 28's gang helped him get out. No one knows exactly why Cameron was let out, but it turned out to be a big mistake because he kept hurting people. After he was let out, Cameron didn't stop. In 2016, he hurt more people and the police kept hearing about it. One time, he beat up a 22-year-old woman just because she wouldn't give him her lighter. She was alone, and when she said she didn't have one, he got really mad and hit her until she passed out. Another time, he threatened a man with a knife to steal from him. When the man tried to stop him, Cameron stabbed him. The man had given Cameron his wallet and phone. But when Cameron wanted his watch too, the man said no and fought back. That made Cameron so mad that he stabbed the man. A man was hurt very badly and was bleeding a lot because Cameron took his things and ran away. The hurt man was taken to the hospital quickly, and he was lucky to stay alive after what happened. But he was hurt really bad and had to deal with those hurt for a long time. Cameron did something very mean to a lady who was by herself. He hit her hard with a hammer, and she got hurt on her head and other places too. She was so hurt that she could have died, but someone walking by saw her and got help. She went to the hospital fast and had a big surgery to help her get better. Cameron didn't care about people at all. He hurt people just because he wanted to, and he kept doing worse things. In September 2016, he did something awful to a young girl named Nikita Moore, who was only 18 years old. On the night of September 10th, 2016, Nikita told her dad she was going to a birthday party. It was the last time her dad saw her. The next day, a lady walking her dog found Nikita in a field near 8th Avenue. She wasn't wearing any clothes and she had a lot of cuts from being stabbed. The police found out later that she was stabbed 98 times, and she had cuts all over her body. Her face was hurt very badly, and her jaw was broken. The worst part was that her private parts were cut in a very bad way. The way the blood was spread around showed that Nikita tried very hard to get away, but the person who hurt her chased her and brought her back to where she was hurt. There were marks on the ground and on Nikita's hands that showed she tried to fight back. When people found out what happened to Nikita, they were very sad and angry. Her family and friends couldn't believe someone could do something so terrible. It was a very sad time for everyone who knew her. Please note, this is a sensitive topic, and the details are quite upsetting. It's important to handle such information with care and respect for those involved. If you or someone you know needs support, it's crucial to reach out to local authorities or professional help. After the terrible loss of Lita, her mother Shireen was so shocked that she couldn't react to anything around her and needed medicine to help her stay calm. Her father Andrew was filled with so much sadness that he couldn't face seeing Lita after what happened to her. It was Lita's aunt who had to go through the heartbreaking task of seeing Lita for the last time. The police were very determined to find out who was responsible for hurting Lita. They started by talking to her family and friends to get clues. One of the first people they talked to was Lita's younger sister, Maria, who was 16 years old. Maria gave the police a very important piece of information that pointed them towards Cameron Wilson. Lita had known Cameron for a long time because he was related to the boyfriend of Lita's sister, Mercia. Cameron used to come over to Lita's house to hang out with his cousin, and that's how he met Lita. At first, they were just friendly, but after a while, Cameron started to show too much interest in Lita. Mercia told the police that Cameron wouldn't leave Lita alone and kept sending her messages that were not nice. He even got mad and threatened her when she said she didn't want to go out with him. Mercia remembered a scary day right before Lita was hurt. Cameron came into their house very angry, grabbed Lita, and put a knife close to her neck. He said that if Lita kept saying no to him, bad things would happen. On the day Lita was hurt, Cameron came to their house again without being invited. He had been drinking and told Lita not to go to a party because he didn't want her to be with other boys. Lita was scared, but still decided to go to the party. She didn't want to let Cameron's scary words stop her from living her life. But sadly, this choice led to something very bad happening. Maria also went to the same party as Lita that night. They got there at about 8 p.m., and the place, called Valhall Park Civic Center, was full of young people having fun, dancing, and talking. The room was bright with colorful lights, and music was playing loudly. Lita found her friends and was happy to see them, giving them hugs and laughing together. But then Cameron showed up at the party without being asked to come. He looked for Lita and tried to talk to her, but he seemed very upset and even grabbed her arm and yelled at her. Lita was really scared and tried to get away from him. Mercia saw what was happening and quickly went to help her sister. It's very sad to talk about these things, and it's important to remember that this is a serious and sensitive story. If you or someone you know is going through a tough time because of something like this, it's really important to talk to someone who can help, like the police or a counselor. They can give support and make sure that the person who did the bad things is stopped. In the middle of a loud party, Maria saw her sister, Lita, in trouble. Cameron was there and he was making a scene. He was yelling and even pushed Maria aside when she tried to protect Lita. He grabbed Lita's hair and tried to take her away. But Lita's friends saw what was happening and came to help. They told Cameron to leave, but he was very angry and said that Lita was his and he could do what he wanted with her. Then he left the party, looking back at Lita with a mean look. Later that night, Cameron came back to the party. People saw him talking to Lita, and she looked upset, but like she had given up. After they talked, Lita left the party with Cameron, even though she didn't really want to. Maria was watching her sister all night and knew something wasn't right. She ran outside and asked Cameron where he was taking Lita. Cameron said they were just going to buy some wine, but Maria knew the stores were closed. She begged Lita not to go with him and reminded her of the scary things Cameron had said before. Lita didn't want to make a big problem and told Maria she would be okay. She promised to call if she needed help and then went with Cameron. That was the last time. Maria saw her sister. She wished she had done more to keep Lita from going with Cameron. The police think that Cameron took Lita to a quiet place near 8th Avenue and hurt her very badly. Lita tried to fight back, but Cameron was too strong for her. After hurting her a lot, he left her there. Cameron walked away without any sign of worry, leaving a scene that was too terrible to describe. The community of Cape Flats was already reeling from Lita Moore's tragic end when another awful discovery was made the next day, on September 11, 2016. A person found the body of 20-year-old Xavier Bester, not far from where Lita had been found. Xavier lived nearby and knew both Lita and Cameron. There were rumors that Xavier and Lita might have been close, but her family didn't think so. The way Xavier was hurt was a lot like what happened to Lita. He had been stabbed many times and was left in a hidden spot. The closeness of where Xavier and Lita were found and the timing made the police think the two sad events might be linked. As they looked more into it, people started to say they saw Xavier at the same party Lita went to. Some even said they saw him and Cameron arguing. After finding out what happened to Lita and Xavier, the police knew they had to catch Cameron. They worked very hard to find proof and make a strong case against him because he was a danger to everyone. They finally caught him on September 12, 2016. When he was arrested, he didn't seem to care at all and even smiled at the police. He kept saying he didn't do anything wrong, even though there was a lot of proof. He said he was at home with his mom the night Lita was hurt. His mom, Sylvia Wilson, said the same thing. But when people said they saw him with Lita at the party, Cameron started to say something different. Cameron claimed that on the night Lita was killed, he was with her. But it wasn't him who took her life. He said it was his friend, Xavier Bester, who did it because he was jealous. Cameron told everyone he tried to stop Xavier but couldn't. For the case of Alfonso F. Royan, Cameron said he wasn't even nearby. He was in another place, visiting a friend. He said he had no reason to hurt Alfonso and that the people who said they saw him were wrong. When it came to Stacy Mail, Cameron said he was at a family party when something bad happened to her. He thought the police should look at Stacy's boyfriend instead, saying he had heard bad things about him. Then when a 13-year-old boy said Cameron was involved, Cameron said it was actually the boy who did it, not him. About Toy Herstabber's death, Cameron said he didn't know her at all. He said the police made up things to make him look guilty and that someone was trying to blame him for something he didn't do. At first, Cameron said he was visiting family far away when Ernest Rasmus was killed. But when the police showed proof he was there, he changed his story. He said Ernest attacked him first, and he was only defending himself. Cameron had so many different stories that it was hard to believe. The police thought it was very unlikely that he was in all those places or that so many people would try to make him look guilty. As they looked more into Cameron's actions, they found out he might have done a lot of bad things. He was accused of 15 serious crimes, including hurting 5 people so badly that they died, as well as other violent acts and having guns he shouldn't have. During his time in court, Cameron acted like he didn't care. He laughed, made jokes, and didn't seem to feel sorry for the harm he caused to many people. When they told him what he was accused of, Cameron just smiled and said he didn't do it, even though there was a lot of proof. In June 2017, after a long trial that made many people feel very sad and angry, Cameron Wilson was found guilty of almost all the crimes, 13 out of 15. The courtroom was full of people who knew the victims. They cried and comforted each other when they heard the decision. For them, it was a mix of sadness and relief, because at last, there was justice. When the judge said Cameron was guilty, the courtroom was full of different feelings. Indianapolis is a city of contrasts. However, for the Blackburn family, what was meant to be a peaceful haven and a home filled with God's grace turned into a site of violent tragedy. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had just returned from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car when a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After finishing the call, he got out of the car and went into the house. As he opened the door, he froze and his gym bag fell from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davy, confused and in shock, rushed to his wife's side, checked for a pulse, and urgently dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive. The living room was in complete disarray, with items scattered everywhere and her purse emptied. From the second floor, the cries of a small child could be heard. Emergency services arrived at the house within 8 minutes, cordoned off the area, and filled the house with police officers and investigators. The victim, 28-year-old Amanda Blackburn, was rushed to the hospital. But let's go back to the beginning to ensure we don't miss any important details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Bures was born on July 31, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She attended school in Indianapolis, Indiana until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and by 2008, she earned an associate's degree from Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and the power of God's Word were paramount. Her father was the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. From a young age, Amanda knew church sermons and psalms by heart and honored them unconditionally. While other children were eager to grow up, attend parties, and experience romantic love, Amanda's heart was devoted to Jesus, and she dreamed of serving him. God loved Amanda deeply, for he had created her in the likeness of an angel, a blonde-haired, slender girl with an open, kind smile and sincere intentions. Her beauty was matched by her pure thoughts and heart, always filled with love for her neighbor. As a teenager, Amanda took a vow of chastity, pledging not to kiss a man until she was married, and she remained true to her word. Her heart fluttered when she met her true love, Davy Blackburn, a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a Christian family. Davy and Amanda met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson Christian band concert organized by her sister and Davy's best friend. Although they attended different colleges, they spent every vacation together, cherishing a pure, platonic love free from earthly lusts. They enjoyed walks, shared their innermost thoughts, and delighted in excerpts from church books. Before returning to school once, Davy and Amanda had a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy jokingly called her a milk girl, and looking at her, he realized she was the one he wanted to marry. Despite their long-distance relationship, they remained close through constant messages, calls, and cherished every vacation together. Their respect for the sanctity of their relationship led them to visit a psychologist to learn how to communicate effectively. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davy told friends that their first kiss confirmed a special bond ordained by God. For the first 4 years of their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Nogle. However, Davy desired more and proposed moving to Indianapolis to start a new church for youth. Initially reluctant to leave her family, Amanda eventually agreed, believing that God had significant plans for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved to Indianapolis to plant an independent, high-profile church on the north side. Their religious organization focused on young people, featuring weekly videos on their website about relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. In 2014, the family welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They enjoyed a happy life in a comfortable home on a quiet street with a fulfilling job at their church, which attracted many young followers. However, the Blackburns' perfect harmony was shattered on November 10, 2015. Ambulance crews arrived at their residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8 a.m. Amanda, who was pregnant, was rushed to the hospital and placed on a ventilator, undergoing resuscitative measures. Tragically, Amanda passed away the next day, along with her unborn baby girl, who was named Evie Grace. Her death prompted an outpouring of sympathy and prayers on social media for an extended period. As friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts, on November 11th, the day she was officially declared dead, Davy released an official statement. He said that Amanda had made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone she knew, and her mission was to know Jesus as her personal savior and to share him with multitudes. He believed that through her death and legacy, more people would come to a saving faith in Christ. Davy expressed certainty that Amanda wanted him to continue the work they had started in Indy, affirming his belief that God would turn their tragedy into triumph and that the best was yet to come. The murder of the pregnant woman was a devastating blow not only to her Orthodox family, but also a shock to the entire state. People demanded justice for Amanda and her unborn child, insisting that the perpetrator be found and punished. In his first interview after the incident, Davy Blackburn recounted finding Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially naked, with her underwear lying nearby, and was lying in a pool of blood, face down. Davy told investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center, leaving the door unlocked as he usually did. It's unclear if locking the door would have deterred the criminals, but it would have made it harder for them to enter the house so easily, possibly giving Amanda time to contact emergency services. The attack left Amanda with 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was to the head. No arrests were made in the days immediately following the crime, but police quickly determined that Davy Blackburn was not involved. During the trial, Davy Blackburn's testimony was supplemented by that of Scott Floyd, the first emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department who arrived at the home after Davy's 911 call. Scott testified that Davy was outside at the end of the driveway with bloody hands when they arrived and appeared very calm. Davy reportedly did not understand what had happened to Amanda, claiming she was lying on the floor and he could not wake her up. He stated that he had come home from the gym around 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway, occasionally peeking through the front door window to check on baby Weston. He said he finished his call, entered the house at 8:10 a.m. and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious and called emergency services at 8:22 a.m., taking 12 minutes to make the call. In an emergency, 12 minutes is a long time. Davy repeatedly said he thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy and that Amanda might have gotten dizzy and fallen. However, questions arose about why he did not notice the brain matter about 5 feet away from her body. Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on Amanda's head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot wound had occurred a couple of hours earlier. However, these details were not made public in the trial transcripts. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else after calling 911. He said he had called his father. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn, and authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym, clearing him as a suspect. An autopsy conducted on November 12th revealed that Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head, a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that penetrated her biceps, and a through-and-through gunshot wound to her upper back. Additionally, she had multiple scratches on her left cheek, a split lip, and a knocked-out lower tooth, indicating a possible struggle with her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched, including examining CCTV footage from nearby streets and interviewing neighbors and acquaintances. A neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsell, expressed shock, stating that their street was not the type of neighborhood where such a shooting could occur, and that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. The neighbors regarded the Blackburn family as wonderful and truly loving people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards and MacBook bag, the initial theory was robbery. Police determined that on the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls reported home invasions at nearby homes. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse and keys missing, along with her car from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at a home on Sunnyfield Court where 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing. 5 minutes after that, Davy Blackburn made his emergency call. Lieutenant Richard Riddle of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating a connection between Amanda's homicide and other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. While police kept many details of the investigation confidential, they released images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, asking the public for assistance in identifying them. Davy Blackburn expressed confidence that the police were doing everything possible to catch his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured that they had significant resources and leads, giving them confidence that they would soon identify and apprehend those responsible. The key clues used to track down the 3 suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used during the robberies. Authorities recovered the vehicle, which provided further leads in the investigation. On November 11th, near the Blackburns' home, the debit card listed on the ATM receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine the ATM camera, which showed the driver covering his face with a stolen pink sweater. DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witness testimonies were crucial in identifying the suspects. DNA testing from the sweater confirmed that Jalen Watson was one of the suspects, marking the first major breakthrough in the case. Cell phone records played a significant role in the investigation. Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for another burglary, and Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also obtained. These records indicated that Watson's and Gordon's phones were in the area during the crime and near the Chase Bank where Amanda's debit card was used. Larry Taylor was identified through further examination of surveillance footage and tracking his phone number and address. Reports surfaced that a gun had been found near the Blackburn home, delivered to the Broad Ripple Fire Department by a man who claimed to have found it outside the couple's home. The gun was analyzed by crime lab technicians and after 2 weeks of investigation was confirmed to be the murder weapon. Police charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jalen Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. A third suspect, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, was arrested for a parole violation but was not charged with a felony as he did not enter the Blackburn home. When questioned, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, claiming she jumped on him and he didn't want her to scratch him. He then leaned over her body, shot her in the back of the head, and watched her bleed to death. The criminal trio had initially come to rob the Blackburn house, believing it to be an easy target as the front door was left unlocked when Davy went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda. To keep her out of the way, Taylor hit her with a gun. Watson and Gordon, seeing the situation, decided to leave with the bank cards they had stolen earlier. They attempted to withdraw $500 from one ATM unsuccessfully, but managed to get $1,400 from another, where they were caught on CCTV. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. During their absence, Amanda regained consciousness and lunged at Taylor, leading to a struggle. Taylor tackled her and afterwards put the stolen debit cards in the car of an accomplice who had gone to an ATM. Upon returning, Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda. Court documents revealed that the Blackburn home was the third target of the November 10th crime spree by Taylor, Watson, and Gordon. In the first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident was asleep inside the home. They discovered they were being recorded by a video camera but simply moved on. The group drove to another home, broke in through a patio window, and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater, which eventually helped police identify them. Court documents outlined the evidence police collected against the suspects. The most crucial piece of evidence was Watson's DNA on the pink sweater taken during the second burglary, which was then used to cover his face from a surveillance camera as he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with the investigation in return for reduced sentences. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary, though he claimed to be so confused that he couldn't remember clearly. Formal charges were filed by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faced 13 charges, including felony murder for knowingly and willfully killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson was charged with a felony, and both he and Taylor faced multiple charges of burglary, robbery, and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody due to a parole violation, also faced burglary charges. A fourth person, who knew about the crimes but did not participate, was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Hite praised the cooperation that led to the arrest, noting that detectives worked tirelessly without sleep to solve the murder. Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry were instrumental in bringing justice. Given that Amanda was pregnant, prosecutors considered additional charges related to the fetus. Although Amanda's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial in December 2021 was declared a mistrial when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. The final trial took place in October 2022 with more thorough jury selection. Over 100 potential jurors were called, each filling out a 16-page questionnaire to ensure a fair verdict. Larry Joe Taylor was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda Blackburn and additional charges related to burglary. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Taylor. They received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Both Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. In Indiana, a murder conviction can result in 45 to 60 years in prison, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Taylor's sentence, which could add an additional 20 years to his prison term. Because Amanda Blackburn was pregnant when she was brutally murdered, the case drew widespread attention and sympathy. Davy Blackburn, the church's pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death had been caught and would no longer pose a threat. Amanda's death resonated with thousands, including the state's chief executive. Her funeral, held at a Christian church, was attended by more than 2,000 people, including Governor Mike Pence. The Resonate Church set up a donation page to help cover Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn expressed hope in the judicial system, believing it would wisely address the pain caused by the perpetrators. Remarkably, he reported that he had chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. "I was very relieved to learn of the arrest," he told reporters. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." Amanda Blackburn's case generated significant national and international media interest. Davy Blackburn transitioned from an anguished husband to a popular blogger, capitalizing on his tragedy by recording multiple podcasts and videos under the title Nothing Wasted. He began appearing on TV stations, discussing his wife's death, recounting the pain he had experienced, and retelling the tragic story. Despite the sorrowful context, he did not appear unhappy. Amanda's death brought Davy both fame and financial gain. He received an insurance payout after her death, raising suspicions about whether he might have intentionally left the door unlocked on November 10, 2015. What do you think? On March 2, 2016, Davy Blackburn purchased a new 5-bedroom, 4-bath home with a pool. He sold the house where Amanda was murdered. For someone who had lost his beloved wife, Davy appeared quite content. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog with the caption, "How happy I am to have pool parties in my new home." Davy Blackburn has since found happiness in a new marriage. Nothing is wasted. Serendipity. Turn your eyes to Jesus. Gaze upon his marvelous countenance, and earthly things become strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.